Today we will discuss the electrons in periodic potentials, or the one electron approximation that we have used in solving various techniques. And in a way we will discuss the effective mass of electrons. So if we think differently, that the universe of traditional solid state physics is defined by the crystalline lattice, and the principal actors are the elementary excitations in this lattice, right? So uh, one of this discussion is the phonons that are the quanta of lattice vibration, that is we have already gone through. Another is the electron, that is perhaps the principal actor in all of solid state physics. By an electron in a solid, we will mean something a little different from a free electron. We will mean a dressed electron, or an electron plus certain of its interactions. Thus, we will find that it is often convenient to assign an electron in a solid an effective mass. So this is the focus of discussion today. Furthermore, there is more to discuss on lattice vibrations, as you have already read. In particular, we need to analyze anharmonic terms in the potential and see how these terms cause phonon-phonon interactions. This will be done in the uh, next chapter, or in the uh, upcoming days to come. And electron phonon interactions are also been in touch, and therefore we get there we obviously need to discuss electrons in solids. After the Born-Oppenheimer approximation, we have to deal with a many electron problem, as well as the behavior of the lattice. A way to reduce the many electron problem approximately to an equivalent one electron problem is given by the Hartree and Hartree-Fock methods. We will discuss in the master degree level in the uh, condensed matter physics specialization. The density functional method, which allows, at least in principle, the exact evaluation of some ground state properties, is also very important in this regard, and in a certain sense it can be regarded as an extension of the Hartree-Fock method, and it has been much used in recent years. So we are discussing about the electrons in periodic potentials, and in the one electron approximation for free electrons, we have defined the equations as the Hamiltonian is nothing but the minus h cut square by twice m star grad square plus v, where m star is the effective mass, v is defined as constant. The Schrodinger equation h psi k is equals to e psi. Ek is defined as h cut square k square by twice m star plus v. Psi k is defined as the plane wave a to the power I k dot r, where a is constant. But as a comment, the populate energy levels with Fermi-Dirac statistics useful for simple metals. So we have some feeling about the approximation in which the n electron system can be treated as n one electron systems. So the problem we now confronted with is how to treat the motion of one electron in a three-dimensional periodic lattice. One electron in a spatially infinite one-dimensional periodic potential. This is the Kronig-Penney model. And since it is exactly solvable, the Kronig-Penney model is very useful for giving some feeling for electronic energy bands, Brillouin zones, and the concept of effective mass. So we are discussing the wave functions for zero wave vector, and it may appear that there is a certain inconsistency between the discussion in which the emphasized and usefulness of the free electron model as applied to the monovalent metals, and the discussion of the present emphasizing the importance of the states of the isolated atom and also the interaction between the conduction electron and the ion force. So it happily turns out that in the monovalent metals, the inconsistency is sometimes only apparent. It is possible for the energy in a band to depend on the wave vector in approximately the same way as for a free electron, while at the same time the wave function may be quite unlike a plane wave, but may pile up charge on the positive ion cores such as in the isolated atom. So we have already come across the important result of the free electron model was the relation EK, which is E is a K is H cut square by twice M K square, and the quadratic dependence on the energy on the wave vector. We can carry over all the results even if the constant of proportionality is changed with H cut square by twice M star K square, where M star is called the effective mass. And we may simply substitute M star for M in the expressions for the Fermi energy, heat capacity, susceptibility, and conductivity, among others. So we shall now consider the concept of an effective mass from several points of view. We first look at the motion of a wave packet in an applied electric field E. So we suppose that the wave packet is made up of states near a particular k value in a single band. So the general expression for the group velocity Vg is nothing but Vg is equals to d omega dk. Vg is equals to d omega dk, that is the derivative with respect to k from the concept of physical optics. And now the frequency associated with the wave function of energy E is given by omega is equals to E upon h cut. And so Vg is h cut inverse dE dk. If the work dE done on the electron by the electric field E in the time interval dt gives delta E is equals to electronic charge times the electric field times Vg dt. So delta E turns out to be dE dk delta k, which is h cut Vg delta k, using this equation. Thus, on comparing, we get this and this, we get delta k is equals to E capital E over h cut times delta t, or h cut dk dt is equals to E. So it is an important relation showing that in a crystal, h cut, right, h cut dk dt is equal to the external force on the electron, whereas in free space it is of course m dv dt. That is equal to the external force. So Newton's second law of motion, and the point is that the electron in the crystal is subject to forces from the crystal lattice as well as from external sources. So if we choose to express the motion in terms of the external force alone, it is not surprising that the resulting equation of motion is not simply F is equals to mass times acceleration. So it is surprising that any good to all comes out of an approach in terms of external forces alone, but we shall see that the effective mass is a most useful quantity, and we get dVgdt is equals to h cut inverse d2e dk that is h cut inverse d2e dk times dt, using the chain rule of calculus. So using this one, h cut dk dt is equals to ee, we have dVgdt is equals to h cut inverse d2e by dk dt, that is h cut inverse this. So we have dVgdt is equals to d2e dk2 times ee by h cut square. So it appears on comparison with one classical equation, that is dVdt is equals to ee by m, that is the force per mass is the rate of change of velocity, that is acceleration. Comparing these two equations, these h cut square divided by d2e dk square plays the role of a mass, right? Role of a mass, and we call this quantity the effective mass. So our effective mass is m star is equals to h cut square upon d2e dk2. And if the energy is given by E is equals to h cut square by twice m star k square. M star here is consistent with this equation. So it is easy to generalize to take into account the anisotropic energy surface. We find the components of the effective mass tensor is m upon m star ij is equals to m upon h cut square d2e over dki dkj, where I and j are the Cartesian coordinates. We shall now discuss the consequences of the effective mass. That is, we suppose for simplicity that in the portion of a band of interest, all the states may be described by the same value of the effective mass m star. And in that case, EF at absolute zero is equals to h cut square by twice m star, 3 pi square into the power 2/3. And so the Fermi energy EF and the Fermi temperature TF of a degenerate electron gas are inversely proportional to m star. We may then introduce m star consistently in theory in place of m. So thus to various results of the free electron theory, we find that CV, which is turns out to be this, which is gamma times T, gives us CV is also proportional to m star heat capacity. The Pauli spin susceptibility is also proportional to m star, directly proportional to the effective mass. And more importantly, the electrical conductivity and the mobility, right? Gamma sigma is equals to n square tau by m star, mu is equals to e tau by m star. So all are disproportional to the effective mass. So the metals of the transition groups of the periodic table are known to have unfilled inner shells, and the corresponding bands may be unfilled, as the overlap of inner shells on adjacent atoms is likely to be relatively small. The bands will be quite narrow in energy, and the density of states will be high. We therefore expect that transition metals we have values m star upon m is far greater than 1, and to have high electronic heat capacities and high paramagnetic susceptibilities. High diamagnetic susceptibilities will occur when m star upon m is far lesser than 1. The effective mass of electron for the free electron energy in terms of k is given by h cut square k square by 8 pi square m, where m is the mass of the electron, and differentiating this expression, we get d is equals to h cut square k by 4 pi square m, and dt dk square is equals to h cut square by 4 uh, pi square. So that m is equals to h square by 4 pi square d2e dk2 to the power minus 1. For a free electron model where E versus K has a parabolic relationship, as the mass of the electron is considered to be constant, therefore d2e dk2 can also be taken as constant. However, when the electrons move in a periodic potential of the crystal lattice, the parabolic relationship between E and K no longer exists. There is a breakup in the curve at various zone boundaries, leading to the origin of allowed and forbidden bands. Near the forbidden band, the curvature of E versus K curve changes and can become negative, since as K approaches the zone boundary, d2E dk2 first reduces to 0 and then becomes negative. Therefore, d2E dk2 is no longer a constant, as also the mass of the electron. Actually, both of them are a function of K. Thus, under periodic potential, the mass of the electron gives by this equation is known as the effective mass and represented by the symbol m star is simply this. So this is the plot of the effective mass, energy, and the first and the second derivatives of the energy as function of K. The effective mass is a new concept and arises because of the interaction of the electron wave packet with the periodic lattice. If the interaction between them is very large, or in other words, if there is a strong binding force between the electron and the lattice, it will be difficult for the electrons to move in, meaning thereby that the electron has acquired a large effective mass. To explain a negative effective mass, let us suppose that there is an electron with k values just less than pi by 8 at the boundary. It will manage to move through the crystal, but then suppose that a field is applied which should accelerate it and increase k. As the electron responds to the field, it will meet the condition for Bragg reflection and will be scattered back in the opposite direction. In this way, it will behave like a particle with a negative charge and negative mass. A force applied in one direction may cause acceleration in other, not necessarily just the opposite direction. The effective mass of an electron may be positive or negative and is shown in this figure by plotting a curve between m star and k in the first Brillouin zone for one-dimensional lattice. It is clear that the effective mass is positive in the lower part, this of the band, lower k value, and negative close to the zone boundary near k is equals to pi by. The figure also shows that the curve E versus K, d dk versus K, and d2E dk2 versus K in qualitative form. The effective mass m star may be equal to m only when the energy is not near the edge of a band. And E versus K curve is parabolic, that is only under the free electron approximation. In most conductors, m star equals to m, as the band is only partially filled. In semiconductors, insulators, and certain conductors, that is Bismuth, where full or almost full valence bands are involved, the effective mass differs from it. We'll now discuss the Sommerfeld theory of conduction in metals. To find the velocity distribution for electrons in metals, consider a small volume element of k space about a point k vector of volume dk vector. So allowing for the twofold spin degeneracy, the number of one electron levels in this volume element is v upon 4 pi cube dk vector. One can replace this dk vector as d cube t. The probability of each level being occupied is just the Fermi-Dirac distribution. F is a function of Ek, and therefore the total number of electrons in the k space volume element is this times the distribution, that is V by 4 pi cube dk times function of Ek, where Ek is h cut square k square by 2m. Simple. Since the velocity of a free electron with wave vector k is velocity h cut k by m, and the number of electrons in an element of volume dV with V is the same as the number in an element of volume dk is equals to m by h cut whole cube dV. About k is equals to mv divided by h cut, and consequently the total number of electrons per unit volume of real space in a velocity space element of volume dV about v is fv dV, where fv is nothing but m by k whole thing cube divided by 4 pi square 1 upon e to the power half mv square minus mu upon kbt plus 1. So mu is the chemical potential. In particular case, this takes the value of Fermi energy. And Sommerfeld re-examined the Drude model, replacing the classical Boltzmann Maxwell-Boltzmann velocity distribution by the Fermi-Dirac distribution, using a velocity distribution constructed from quantum mechanical arguments in an otherwise classical theory requires some justification. So one can describe the motion of an electron classically if one can specify its position and momentum as accurately as necessary, without violating the uncertainty principle. A typical electron in a metal has a momentum of the order of h cut kf. So the uncertainty in its momentum, that is delta p, must be small compared with h cut kf for a good classical description. And since kf is inversely proportional to 1 upon rs, the uncertainty in position must satisfy delta x nearly equals to h cut by delta p, that is far greater than 1 upon kf or at the order of rs. So rs is of the order of mean interelectronic distance, that is the Armstrong. Thus a classical description is possible if one has to consider electrons localized to within atomic distances. So further, we will discuss the AC conductivity of metals. We first derive to calculate the current induced in a metal by a time-dependent electric field. We write the field in the form of ET is real E omega e to the power minus I omega t. The equation of motion for the momentum per electron becomes dp dt is equals to minus p upon tau minus E. And we seek a steady state solution of the form pt is real part of p omega e to the power minus I omega. Substituting the complex p and e into this which must be satisfied by both the real and imaginary part of any complex solution, we find that p omega must satisfy minus I omega p omega is equals to minus p upon tau minus e is a function of omega, since j is equals to minus nep by m. The current density is just jt is equals to real j omega e to the power minus I omega t, and j omega is equals to minus nep by m, that is n square divided by m e omega upon 1 upon tau minus I omega, and eventually j omega is a function is equals to sigma omega e omega, where sigma omega is known as the frequency dependent or AC conductivity and is given by sigma omega is equals to omega naught divided by minus I omega tau 1 minus, and where omega naught is equals to n square tau upon m. So note that this correctly reduces to the DC Drude result at zero frequency. The wavelength is large compared to the mean free path, and we may proceed as follows. In the presence of the specified current density J, we may write the Maxwell's equation like this: divergence of E equals to 0, divergence of H equals to 0, curl of E is equals to 1 upon minus C del H del T, and curl of H is equals to 4 pi by C J plus 1 upon C del E del T. So we look for a solution with time dependence e to the power minus I omega t, noting that in a metal we can write J in terms of E via curl of E is equals to minus grad square E, that is I omega by C, curl of H, that is I omega by C 4 pi sigma by C E minus I omega by C E, or minus grad square is equals to omega square upon C square 1 plus 4 pi I omega by I sigma by omega times E. So this is the form of the usual wave equation: minus grad square is equals to omega square by C square epsilon omega E, with a complex dielectric constant given by epsilon omega is equals to 1 plus 4 pi I sigma divided by omega. So if we are at frequencies high enough to satisfy omega tau is far greater than 1, then to a first approximation gives epsilon omega is equals to 1 minus omega p square divided by omega square, where omega p known as the plasma frequency as in given by 4 pi ne square divided by m. So when my epsilon is real, right, and negative when omega is less than omega p, the solution of this equation, uh, uh, this wave equation decay exponentially in space, that is no radiation can propagate. However, when epsilon is positive for omega is greater than omega p, the solution of this equation becomes oscillatory. So radiation can propagate and the metal should become transparent. This conclusion is only valid, of course, if our high frequency assumption is satisfied, that is omega tau is far greater than 1. In the neighborhood of omega equals to omega p. So if we express tau in terms of the resistivity through uh, and we can use the definition of omega p square is equals to 4 pi ne square by m of the plasma frequency. We can compute omega p tau. So a second important consequence is that the electron gas can sustain charge density oscillations, and by this we mean a disturbance in which the electric charge density has an oscillatory time dependence e to the power minus I omega t. From the equation of continuity, divergence of J equals to minus del rho del T, and divergence of J is equals to I omega rho, and Gauss's law divergence of E is equals to 4 pi rho. We find that I omega rho is equals to 4 pi sigma rho, and this has the solution provided that 1 plus 4 pi I sigma divided by omega equals to 0, right? So which is precisely the condition we found above the concept of propagation of radiation. The nature of this charge density wave, known as the plasma oscillation or plasmon, can be understood in terms of the very simple model. Imagine displaying the entire electron gas as a whole through a distance d with respect to the fixed positive background of the ions, and the resulting surface charge gives rise to an electric field of magnitude 4 pi sigma, where sigma is the charge per unit area at either end of the slab. This is the simple model of the plasma oscillation. Consequently, the electron gas as a whole will obey the equation of motion, that is n times m d double dot is equals to minus e modulus of 4 pi sigma, that is minus ne 4 pi nde, that is minus 4 pi ne square nd, which leads to oscillation at the plasma frequency. Few direct observations have been made for plasmons. Perhaps the most notable is the observation of energy losses in multiples of h cut omega p when the electrons are fired through thin metallic films. Nevertheless, the possibility of their excitation in the course of other electronic processes must always be borne in mind.